Hi, can you spare £50 please? Please, I need to join a group fight, please! Yep, that could very well be me in the future. It could also be you if you're not careful when diving into the mad world of mechanical keyboards. If you're like me and you don't enjoy having clutter around the house, you probably only want one version of a product that does the job well. And in this video, I'm going on a journey to build my endgame custom mechanical keyboard in my first try without ending up financially ruined. If you're interested in doing the same or just curious about the hobby, come along for the ride. So I stumbled on the world of mechanical keyboards quite recently and totally by accident. It was a clear black night, a clear white moon. Warren G was on the streets trying to consume. Whilst that was going down, I was sitting at my desk, like most nights, in my pants. And I just about had it with my MacBook keyboard looking oily and grubby. I started watching reviews for the Apple Magic Keyboard and thought maybe I'll buy it and get that oily and grubby instead. I do have a cheap wireless keyboard already and it has some qualities, but I generally don't use it because it feels mushy and has an ANSI layout. The Magic Keyboard was quite promising, especially to an Apple fanboy like me. But the only reason I didn't pull the trigger at the time is because it doesn't have a backlight. Eventually I came across the Logitech MX Mechanical, and that does have a fancy backlight. Okay, so here's a sleek quality keyboard for the Mac that has a feature I want, but it comes in 3 varieties: Cherry MX Red, Brown and Blue. What's that all about? So I embark on some research, and a few articles and videos later, YouTube now has me in the grip of the keyboard algorithm. And then it happened. I clicked on a video that did something to me I've only ever experienced when I was around 5 years old, when my brother and I was under the mahjong table and he dared me to sniff Auntie Lou's toes, which awakened something deep within me. I know, disgusting. Join my OnlyFans for my feet pics. So where was I? Okay, yeah, I'm not saying I want to go around putting keyboards into my mouth. I'm just saying this video opened the door, I walked through it, and there's no going back. The video was Near Lucid's review of the Jelly Epoch. If you know about your keyboards, you've probably heard about the Jelly Epoch already. And if you haven't, check out Near Lucid's video in the description below after we're done here. A few things stood out to me of the Jelly Epoch. The way it looks, the way it sounds, and the overall quality. So why don't I have this keyboard already? 2 reasons. Number 1, it's expensive. I'm not shy about spending a bit more for something I want, and also saving money in the long run by skipping a few upgrade steps. But I find that the sweet spot for a crossover of price and quality is usually within the mid-range. When going beyond that point, you sometimes start to get diminishing returns for your money. The Jelly Epoch is £400 to £500 for the base kit alone, and that is without any keycaps or switches, which can get quite expensive for a decent pair. I think that's a bit overkill. Reason number 2, and this one's a biggie, it's out of stock. A lot of things in this hobby are out of stock, and the more sought after items follow a group buy model. What is a group buy? Well, what happens is a company will usually announce when their product goes live, either with a limited number of products available or within a limited purchasing time frame. That means you're usually competing with hundreds, if not thousands of other people to pre-buy an item that you won't necessarily see until months later, when you might be a completely different person. And if you miss the group buy, you'll have to wait for a round 2 or maybe even a round 3 later on down the line. Let me remind you, this is a pre-buy and not a pre-order. So money is taken out of your account the moment you place your order, and there's no way of backing out of the contract. Okay, so I'm not getting a Jelly Epoch, but I still want something as close to it as possible whilst ticking off some additional boxes. I want quality, I want aesthetics, I want a pleasant sound. I also want a backlight because my keyboard tray sits in a perfect spot to dodge my monitor and room lighting at the same time. And it can get quite dark down there whilst I'm up late refreshing Afton Rose's OnlyFans page. Wireless connectivity would be great for convenience, and it absolutely has to have an ISO layout so I can keep my Team Big Enter membership. Oh hello, you're right, how you doing? Do you like Big Enter? Yeah, I like Big Enter. Do you? Yeah, I like Big Enter as well. Do you? Yeah, I like Big Enter. Do you? And I want all that in a nice, small form factor and for a decent price. So now I'm ready to go keyboard shopping, right?
What do you mean the rabbit hole goes deeper?
Indeed it does. I have to think about stabilizers for the bigger keys, whether or not I'm going to lube and add film to my switches, the kind of material the keycap should be made of, how I want the switches to feel, am I going for a POM plate, alu plate, or whatever the hell FR4 is. It's a lot to think about and the cost just keeps on racking up. Why don't I go for a cheap keyboard, figure it all out, and then go for my endgame? Well, I don't like clutter, so I wouldn't want a burner keyboard sitting around collecting dust. And also, like I said earlier, I'm not a collector, so I only want one of everything if I can help it. So eventually I narrowed down my choices to these keyboards. QK65, out of stock. Keychron Q2, so good, but would require a lot of mods to get the right sound. Odin Gaming Aurora 65, almost perfect, but no ISO layout. Newfie Halo 65, great features and incredible value, but the sound was just not for me, and also there's no ISO. The latter three in-stock keyboards would have saved me a lot of headache, but then this video would have been a lot less interesting. After weeks of research, I finally settled on my ultimate dream keyboard. I mentioned that the QK65 by QWERTY Keys was out of stock, and that one in particular really caught my attention, especially since it received rave reviews and was made by a sister company of Owlab, the people who brought us the Jelly Epoch. Unfortunately, I missed the group buy. It ended just a few weeks before I started this journey, and a round 2 had not yet been announced. The QK65 was praised for being exceptional value for its price range, and I was eager to benefit from this new wave of high quality budget keyboards to satisfy one of my requirements. So when another new company, known as MyKeyClub, joined the fray with their budget offering to rival the quality and performance of the QK65, I just had to get in on the action. And that's what you're looking at now. This is the JRIS65 by MyKeyClub. The first thing that strikes me is the heaviness of this little chonker. The top and bottom case is made of aluminium, and on the back there are 2 stainless steel weights that contribute to a deeper sound profile and its gorgeous looks. It comes with a bunch of additional extras like foams, rubber socks, and even masking tape. In the earlier days of the hobby, these were things that keyboard fans had to invent themselves and add as modifications to further customize their experience. Nowadays, these mods are often included as standard along with the basic kit. I will explain them in greater detail as we build this keyboard step by step. I have to warn you though, it's been so many months since my research into this stuff that I will probably explain quite a few things incorrectly, so feel free to comment with some facts if I missed the mark. Anyway, with the keyboard now unboxed, let's get ready for the build. You can see the gap for a battery on the left. This is for the Bluetooth version only, which I would have opted for, but that version doesn't support ISO layout, so mine is the basic hot swap version, which means I can change my mechanical switches if I feel like it later on. I'm quite sure only crazy people go for the soldered version these days. The daughter board is already connected to the case, and later on we're going to connect the PCB to it so we can communicate via USB-C. To make sure I don't scratch the gorgeous stainless steel weight, the first thing I'm going to do is apply the rubber feet and install the protector. These small red rings that fell out are washers for the stabilizers, and some people like to put them between the contact points of the top and bottom case to minimize unpleasant sounds. This is known as a force break mod. I won't be using the washers for my build, so back in the bag they go. I've never been good at applying protectors, so even though I use the stickers and wipes to get rid of some dust, I still end up with a bubble or two. It's not like I'm going to be looking at the bottom of the keyboard that often though, so I'm just going to ignore my failures as best I can. And now it's time to set up the PCB, which is the brains of the keyboard. It's the techie bit that receives input from the mechanical switch and lets the computer know which key is being pressed. The JRIS65 PCB has cuts going across it. These are known as flex cuts, which helps to make the typing experience bouncier and softer. But I'm going to be stuffing my build with foam anyway, so it probably won't have much of an effect on my experience. I've already put the first foam into place, and now I have to install the stabilizers. Stabilizers go under the larger keys to stop them from wobbling, and the advice from all the cool kids is to apply lubrication to stop them from rattling. I've already lubed a few of them before starting my build, but I left the spacebar undone so I can show you what the process looks like. Most keyboard fans like to use Krytox 205G0, so that's the lube I have here. And to apply it, I'm using a paintbrush that came free with the lube. Thanks, mech mods. I don't want to overdo it in case I make an irreversible mistake, so I'm just applying a bit onto each of the housings and then I will apply it to the stem before putting it together. The reason I'm not using the red washers from earlier is because I bought stabilizers designed for the specifications of my PCB, so they should fit snugly. I took so long to build this keyboard that my light battery died on me. Good thing I have an Elgato key light nearby, which I probably should have been using since the beginning. Anyway, now that the light has returned, let's sort out the stabilizer so I can move on with my life. I took nearly half an hour to figure out how to get my stabilizers in properly because everything I did made it feel like I was going to break something. Eventually I figured out that it felt best when I raised the PCB with two hands and used either my fingers or thumbs to press them in. The stabilizers I bought are by TX. Some stabilizers need to be screwed in, but these are clip-in stabilizers and they fit very snugly. This is the second foam I'll apply, and the purpose of this plate foam is to lower the intensity of sound coming from my switches. It's also going to take away some of the stiffness from the plate material. I went with the FR4 plate, which you can see here, and typically there are four main choices of plate material to consider, which are PC, POM, FR4 and aluminium. Some fancy keyboards will also have a brass option. As you can imagine, the material will have a big impact on the sound and feel during typing. I opted for the Gateron boxed inked black switches, which are a classic for people in search of a fockier sound. And I won't be surprised if that word is new to you. It's an onomatopoeia for that deeper, muted sound signature that I'm looking for. On the other end of the onomatopoeia spectrum is the clack, which currently isn't something that appeals to me at all. I had these switches lubed and filmed before being sent out to me, which made them cost twice the price. Lubed switches feel less scratchy, and adding a thin piece of film inside them once again adds to a muted sound signature. I had some trouble inserting these initially until I settled on my technique, quite similar to how I installed the stabilizers, by supporting the PCB with my hands and pushing them in with two thumbs or two fingers. I had to be careful of how I oriented my switches because my choice of ISO layout meant that some of the switches had to go in sideways or facing south instead of north. Whilst I was waiting months for this thing to arrive, I ordered a second set of silent switches from Otemu via AliExpress, and the store was kind enough to send me some additional testers. Clicky switches don't really appeal to me, but I thought it would be fun to use it for my shift button to see how I like it on a key that I would press just often enough to get a feel for it. I'm going to use the provided gasket jackets on my PCB. The gasket mounted style of the JRIS65 means that the typing experience should be less stiff and the acoustics will be more in line to my taste, since there will be less vibrations. The cool thing about this keyboard kit is that it comes with its own custom masking tape. Applying masking tape to the bottom of a PCB is known as the tape mod, which mutes higher pitched sounds and returns the deeper sounds. 3 layers are usually recommended, but the JRIS only comes with 1, which is fine for me to experiment with on my first build. I'm just happy it was included in the kit. Okay, with the PCB all ready, time to prepare the case. As mentioned, I don't need the battery compartment, so first I'll fill that with the foam. And I have 2 final pieces of case foam, but I'm only going to use one and see how I like it for now. Case foam is another mod that originated from the community. It fills out the empty space in the keyboard to limit vibrations and, altogether now, alters the sound signature. I'm coming right up to the end of the build now, but this last part was absolute hell. I had to separate the top half of the board to get a better angle to connect the JST cable to my PCB. Unfortunately, one of the screws were faulty, and wrestling with it meant that I ended up stripping some of the paint from the case. I'll show this properly later, but I can advise that anyone looking to build a keyboard should probably find a screwdriver with a longer shaft or a shaft extension. After some hand gymnastics, I finally got the cable in about halfway, and it seemed to be working fine, so I left it at that and moved on. For the finishing touch, I'm using the Tsukimi keycaps by Osume. These are PBT keycaps, so they won't look as oily as the ABS keycaps on my MacBook. It was very hard to find a decent set of keycaps at a budget price that had an ISO enter key, the Mac OS specific keys, and a colorway that I was interested in. This set almost ticked all my boxes but cost me over £100. We'll talk more about money later. For now, please enjoy some shots of my fully built endgame custom mechanical keyboard. Before this video comes to a close, I want to talk about my overall experience with the mechanical keyboard hobby. But first, let's focus on the JRIS65 in particular. I've said this a few times already because I truly believe it. This keyboard looks gorgeous. The curves all around are so smooth, and that's one of the reasons why I was willing to jump on this instead of waiting for a round 2 of the QK65. The case on that has angled edges, whereas this one has rounded edges, and that to me is pleasing. The paint job inside and out looks great, and even though I won't see the PCB, the FR4 plate and the stainless steel weight that often in daily use, the fact that they look nice and feel good gives me that joy to owning something meaningful. That's important to me because Maria Kondo said so. But the looks aren't flawless. For some reason, my numbers row is uneven in places, so when I look at it from a top-down perspective, it's a bit of a jumbled wavy line. I'm not 100% sure if that's due to my inexperience and building it incorrectly, or if it's the keycaps I chose. It's simply unclear, but I'm going to just ignore it and live with it since the rest of this thing looks so nice. Don't be anal, don't be anal, don't be anal. For a beginner like myself, I really appreciate that it came with so many options for customization. The flex cuts on the PCB and choice of gasket socks or jackets lets me experiment with the typing experience. The idea of having a bouncy keyboard doesn't appeal to me, and I don't know who it does appeal to, but I appreciate that the choice is there. I like that it comes with all the various foams I might need because I'm no good at crafts and cutting things, so I won't need to do additional research on what kind of materials I need to buy and the tools required to do it. Some people might say it's inexpensive to get those things, but to me, the time cost was worth the shortcut. When it comes to options and quality, the JRIS65 has nailed these things, but did it satisfy my list of requirements for an endgame keyboard? Let's refer to my list from before. So quality and aesthetics we've already talked about. I'm happy with those things, so we can tick those off. I wanted a pleasant sound, and I'm happy to say that because of the included options available and the choices I made regarding the plate, switches, stabilizers and keycaps, I got the exact sound I was hoping for. In Near Lucid's video, he compared the sound of the Jelly Epoch to marbles or small stones clinking together. And that's where my brain goes when I listen to my build of the JRIS65. I'm not claiming that the sound is exactly the same. I can't, since I've never been in the presence of a Jelly Epoch. But if that's the impression I'm getting from my keyboard and I'm deriving pleasure from what I can hear, then I'm happy. Have a listen for yourself. In terms of backlight and wirelessness, unfortunately, these are missing from my keyboard. Remember earlier in the video when I said that by the time your keyboard arrives several months after you've paid for it, you might be a different person? Well, that's kind of what happened to me. My circumstances have changed, so this keyboard is going to be living on a desk that does have adequate lighting, so a backlight isn't that important for me anymore. Bluetooth connectivity would have been amazing for a cleaner desk setup, but In the period of my research, I didn't find anything with wireless features and support for ISO and hot swap at the same time. And these two things are more important to me than wireless connectivity. So it's a cross for those two, but I can get by without them for now. I'm happy to have my big enter on this keyboard. I mentioned this briefly on the build, and this has nothing to do with the JRIS keyboard kit itself. But as an ISO user, it's so difficult to find a decent set with ISO enter. It's even rarer to add on the macOS keys on top of that, and the true unicorn is to get the squiggly line button to finish it all off. So unfortunately, I had to put a placeholder in there for now. This is more of a thing for keycap manufacturers to sort out, and going back to the JRIS, I'm thankful I can tick off the ISO options in my requirements. For the size, that's a definite tick. I got a bunch of features I want in a 65% layout, and I'm satisfied with that. Ideally, I should have waited for the 75% version of this keyboard because I use F keys regularly enough, but the JRIS65 was only announced several months after I had already paid for and committed to the 65. Having said that, I find the size quite cute and unique, and I think it will look great on my desk without commanding too much of a footprint. My last point is affordability, so now would be a great time to talk about money. The kit alone cost me £270. That does not scream budget to me. As a newcomer, I look at that price and it's something to consider as a serious investment. And before you yell at me and tell me £270 isn't that much money, the price is for the kit on its own. To get it up and running, I had to add stabilizers and lube at £27, pre-lubed and filmed switches at £95 because the additional kit to do it myself would have added up to the same price anyway without even factoring in the time commitment. Keycaps were £130, and there are other little hidden costs too, like a screwdriver and a key mat because I want to be part of the club. If you're not good at quick maths, don't worry, I've done the work for you. In total, it cost me more than £522. So is it affordable? If you're already in the hobby and have things that you can slap onto the keyboard kit, yeah, £270 is kind of affordable. As a newcomer to the hobby though, it's very hard to justify considering that it costs more than a PS5, more than a Series X, more than a Steam Deck. It costs more than an iPad mini, and this thing is crazy useful. Did it financially ruin me? I'd say it definitely did some damage, and it cost me enough so that I don't want to spend much more on the hobby. I don't intend to buy another keyboard ever again unless this one somehow breaks. And that's the thing, even though the total cost is very expensive, I've done it now, and provided nothing goes wrong, I do have my endgame keyboard. I'm going to try think of it like buying a good mattress. At the end of the day, if it promotes good health and typing habits, it's worth spending some money on it, but there's no way I'm going to be a collector of keyboards or mattresses. Okay, so it sounds like I'm generally more positive about owning this than not owning it. How was my journey to get here? It took so long for this keyboard to be manufactured and delivered to me that countless other keyboards have been announced, and some of them might have ticked off every box that I set in my criteria list. This is why some people in this hobby accidentally fall into the trap and end up owning several keyboards. It's because of the fear of missing out. They've already got a keyboard coming, but then they spot another that looks amazing and boom, they've started a collection. I'm lucky that a few attempts at nofap has at least taught me some restraint. It's also incredibly difficult to keep up with trends and the new thing, because the goalposts are always constantly moving. If you don't want to fall into complete financial ruin, you really have to fight off the urges and wait for the keyboard that is absolutely close to perfection for you. If you're unlucky like myself and you need an ISO layout, that's probably close to impossible, and you'll have to make sacrifices on some features because it seems to me that only ANSI layout keyboards have all the bells and whistles at the same time. But I did enjoy parts of it too. Whilst building the keyboard, I did feel moments of serenity, and I can imagine those moments being quite addictive and even giving off a dopamine buzz. It's nice to step back after it's done and appreciate the achievement of putting it together. There's also a ton of things to learn about every facet of the keyboard, and the various people I ran into on Discord and subreddits were always very helpful. Maybe the true keyboard was the friends we made along the way. I feel like the research, the shopping and learning, the camaraderie of the process is almost as important as the final product. But the thing is, you can probably apply most of that to almost any hobby. If your goal is to get a good keyboard, You can do that at a fraction of the price with off-the-shelf products. But if you have space in your life for a new hobby, and connecting with new people and individualism of your product is important for you, it's a decent journey to go on. If I could do this whole thing again, I would definitely be more patient and skip a group buy if I wasn't 1000% sure on the keyboard. But when it comes down to it, I do have a great looking keyboard that fits my taste. It sounds awesome to me, and hopefully it will keep running for years and years to come. Thanks for sitting through this video. I know it was longer than usual. And by the way, I'm very close to my goal of hitting 1000 subscribers. So if you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It helps a ton. I do tech and gaming videos on this channel, so say hi if you're into that kind of thing, and maybe even suggest other hobbies I can temporarily dip into. I might consider it. Check out one of these videos on screen now, and I'll see you in the next one.